The Lost Codex. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Elias Costa, an amateur archaeologist with a passion for ancient civilizations, was used to exploring abandoned ruins and collecting smaller artifacts that told the story of forgotten times. However, that hot Sunday afternoon, something would change your life forever. In an isolated cave around an old town, while clearing the powder of a stone shelf, Elias found a piece of old leather wrapped and carefully stored between rocks. It was strange and mysterious, unlike any other artifact he had already found. Carefully, he unfolded the leather to reveal an ancient codex whose pages were covered with symbols he did not recognize, but who knew were incredibly old. His fingers shaved as he flipped his coder. That was not just a historical relic. The quality of leather, the shape of letters, and the sophistication of drawings suggested something of incalculable value, perhaps even a lost artifact that many had sought for centuries. Your heart has accelerated. He knew this discovery could transform his career and life, but he would also expose him to unimaginable dangers. Before leaving the cave, Elijah took some pictures of the codex with his cell phone, but decided to keep him hidden until he could confirm his authenticity. However, what he did not know was that from the moment he touched his codex, he was already being observed. As he left the cave, a black man stared at him from afar. His intentions were anything but peaceful. Liking the story? Subscribe and share to see how this surprising adventure will unfold. Chapter 2. Signs of Danger. Back to his apartment, Elias began researching the symbols he turned into the codex. He compared with old records but found nothing similar in his sources. Frustration grew, but at the same time, the excitement of being in the face of something unprecedented propelled him. Finally, he decided to make contact with an old friend and mentor, renowned Professor Gustavo Mendes, one of the greatest experts in ancient languages. However, even before you can call the teacher, a strange noise coming from the corridor made him freeze. The sound was of light steps, almost inaudible, but did not go unnoticed by the ears attentive to Elijah. He immediately knew something was wrong. Looking through the door, he saw a shadow sliding down the hallway. In seconds, his door was broken into a crash. Two men, both dressed in black and armed, entered their apartment. Elias had no time to waste. He took the codex and ran to the balcony, where he threw himself into the next building, narrowly escaped from the hands of the intruders. While fleeing the city streets, he knew that his life had changed forever. The code he had found was not just a historic piece. He carried secrets that placed him in the center of a deadly hunt. And now he was being hunted. Liking the story? Subscribe and share to find out what will happen next to this exciting adventure. Chapter 3. The Escape. Elijah ran through the dark and narrow streets, feeling the weight of the codex in his backpack, as if he were more alive than ever. Each time he looked back, he saw shadows moving quickly, men in his heels. His mind, trained to track, always seemed to know where he was. There was no time to think, just run. Turning around a corner, he entered a dark alley, trying to gain time and find a way out. Your mind worked fast. If those men were willing to invade their apartment in the middle of daylight, they were certainly desperate for the codex, and that made him a valuable prey. His steps echoed on the dirty walls of the alley, but soon a thought hit him. He needed help. I couldn't do that alone. He decided that the only person he could trust was Professor Gustavo Mendes. He took the phone, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline, and called the teacher. After a few touches, a calm and quiet voice answered on the other side. Elias? Said Gustavo, surprised. Why are you calling me at this time? I can't say much, teacher, but I found something big. I need your help. I'm in danger. There was a brief break from the other end of the line. Find me in my office at the university. Come fast and please be careful. Elias took a deep breath and put the phone. Gustavo's office at the university was not far away, but getting there without noticing would be a challenge. He could not go back to the main streets. The city, which once looked familiar, was now a treacherous maze. Each corner could hide a danger. Getting out of the alley, Elias opted for an alternative route through an evening market, mixing with the crowd. The smell of food and the shouts of the salespeople helped to mask their presence. However, his instinct told him that he was still being followed. He just didn't know who or how many. Finally arriving at university, Elias entered a side door, rapidly climbing the stairs toward Gustavo's office. When it arrived, it hit 3 times. The door opened slowly and Gustavo, with a serious expression, stared at him. Enter. We have a lot to talk about. Elijah passed the door, but the feeling of being watched did not abandon him. Liking the story? Subscribe and share to see the mysteries that are coming and the secrets Elias will still unravel. Chapter 4. Revelations. As soon as the office door closed, Gustavo locked her and went straight to the point. Elias, what did you find? What is happening? The teacher's voice sounded apprehensive, something unusual for the always calm and thoughtful man. Elijah quickly took off his backpack Codex and placed it on the teacher's table. Gustavo widened his eyes as he saw the old manuscript. This is impossible. He ran his fingers through the edges of the old leather with a reverence, almost not believing what he saw. For centuries we talk about this codex, but no one has ever found proof of its existence. Elias, do you know what this means? I have no idea. I just know I'm being hunted because of him. Gustavo walked away from the table, taking a book from his bookcase, and began to flip him off quickly. This codex, if authentic, is one of the most valuable pieces of antiquity. He belongs to a secret order, the Watchmen of the Relic, who claim to keep the greatest secrets in human history. It is rumored that this code contains maps and instructions for finding artifacts of immense power. Some say that it can even lead to the discovery of a lost knowledge, capable of changing the fate of humanity. Elijah felt a cold in his spine. He knew there was something special in the Codex, but never imagined he was facing something so grand and dangerous. And who are these people behind me? Elias asked, with a mixture of curiosity and dread. Gustavo closed the book and stared at him with a severe expression. If they know what you found, they won't stop until you have the Codex in hand. And they will not have scruples to do whatever it takes to get it. Elias, you are involved in something much bigger than you can imagine. We need to find out what this codex reveals before they do it. The silence in the office was interrupted by a sound of steps outside the door. Elijah and Gustavo looked at each other. The danger was closer than they thought. Liking the story? Subscribe and share to see how far this mortal search will take Elijah and what secrets it will still find out. Chapter 5. The Ambush. The steps outside the office increased by volume, and Elias learned that the time to escape was running out. Gustavo looked at him urgently, gesturing to approach the office window of the office, which gave to a wooded area of the university. Without thinking twice, Elijah ran there as Gustavo hid the codex under some old books. They can't find us here, Gustavo whispered, looking forward to the door. Let's go out the window. They must be armed. Before they could execute the plan, the door was broken into with a deafening crash. Two hooded, armed and cold-looking men entered the office with military accuracy. Elias and Gustavo froze for a second before throwing themselves toward the window. One of the men shot, and the sound of the bullet moving from grazing was enough to rush the escape. Elias jumped through the window, falling awkwardly in the shrubs down there, followed shortly thereafter by Gustavo. They rolled across the floor before they got up and started running through the area deserted and covered with university trees. The sound of voices approaching indicated that the persecutors were still behind them, relentless. The trees provided coverage, but not for long. Where are we going? Elias whispered, panting. Gustavo made a sign to continue silent and follow him. They advanced on a narrow and poorly lit path, hiding behind an old university maintenance cabin. Gustavo peered in the corners, checking if the men were still around. The silence in the air was disturbing. Something was wrong. Suddenly a third man who was hidden in the shadows attacked. He took Elijah by surprise, grabbing him by the neck and throwing him against the cabin wall. Gustavo tried to intervene, but was easily restrained by a quick blow to the stomach that knocked him down. Elijah struggled to breathe as he felt the pressure of the aggressor's hand increased on his neck. The coder, the man himself, silted with a rough voice. Where are you? Elijah, almost fainting, saw Gustavo move on the floor, trying to recover his breath. With one last effort, Elijah kicked the perpetrator's knee, making him lose his balance momentarily. Taking advantage of the distraction, Gustavo got up and, with a stone in his hands, struck the man in his head, leaving him unconscious. Elijah fell to the floor, panting. We need to get out of here now, Gustavo said, pulling Elijah by his arm. They ran once more, but now they knew they were at a disadvantage. His enemies were more numerous, more prepared, and knew exactly what they were behind. Elias and Gustavo needed more than just luck to survive. They needed a plan. Liking the story? Subscribe and share to see how Elijah and Gustavo will escape this ambush and protect the coder. Chapter 6. The Choice. Still panting, Elias and Gustavo reached the end of the path that led outside the university area and entered a small road that seemed to take to the open field. The cold wind of the night blew against their faces, but that was not relieved, only the urgency of continuing the escape. "And now?" Elias asked, struggling to keep calm. Gustavo stopped for a moment, recovering his breath, and then looked at the young archaeologist with a serious expression. "We need to find someone reliable who can help us. Someone who has the resources and knowledge to decipher this code before they do it." Elijah shook his head, agreeing. "But who? We are dealing with something that goes beyond our understanding. They have contacts, weapons. We are alone, teacher." Gustavo nodded, the weight of the situation clearly pressing it. So, as if a lamp turned into his mind, he remembered a person. "I know someone. An old colleague, now inmate, who spent years studying the legends of the Relic Watchmen. If anyone can help us decipher the Codex before it is late, it is it." Elijah, with no alternatives, just waved to continue. They went to the place indicated by Gustavo, an isolated cabin around the city, where the teacher's old friend lived. As they walked, Elijah could not avoid the feeling of weight on his chest. Since he had found his Codex, the life he knew was disappeared. Now he was not just an amateur archaeologist in search of adventures. He was in the middle of a deadly race, where a false step could cost his life and everyone around him. They reached the cabin when the sun was starting to emerge on the horizon. The soft light of the morning revealed a rustic construction, surrounded by thick trees and shrubs. Gustavo knocked on the door firmly. There was a long break, and then a voice on the other side answered. "Who is it?" "It's me, Gustavo. We need your help." The door opened slowly, revealing an aged-looking man, but with close and suspicious eyes. He looked at Gustavo and then to Elijah. "Enter," he said with a serious tone. Upon entering, Elijah noticed that the walls were covered by old maps, symbol designs and texts in unknown languages. The man turned to Gustavo, curiosity shining in his eyes. "So, you found the lost Codex?" Gustavo nodded, taking the book carefully from his backpack. The man caught him with an expression of reverence. "You know what you have here can change everything, don't you? But that has a price." Silence took over the room as the man studied the old pages. Elias knew that from that moment on, there would be no return. Liking the story? Subscribe and share to discover the next step of this dangerous journey and the hidden secrets in the Codex. Chapter 7. The Final Puzzle. The cabin was wrapped in a disturbing silence while the mysterious man, identified as Dr. Amadou Campos, examined the Codex with a thoroughness that only one expert of his strain had. Elijah, nervously sitting, looked at Gustavo, waiting for some sign that this man was really the key to deciphering the puzzle they carried. But time seemed not to advance, and the tension increased to each page facing. "That," said Dr. Amadou after a long breath, his fixed eyes on a specific page. "This is not just a map. It is a puzzle, a key to something much bigger." He looked up, full of worry. "Who else knows that?" Gustavo exchanged a worried look with Elijah before answering. "Some people, but we don't know how many. They are hunting us, desperate to get the coder." "That means they already know too much," Amadou muttered, getting up and starting to walk around the small room. "There is something you need to understand. This codex is not just a guide to old artifacts or secrets. It contains clues about something that legends call the Eternal. An ancient power supposedly capable of remodeling reality." Elias frowned. What he had heard seemed more a myth than reality, but since he had found the Codex, nothing seemed to be in the kingdom of the ordinary. "Remove the reality? Like this?" Elias asked without hiding his skepticism. Amadou stopped and stared at him seriously. "There are ancient civilizations that believe that the world we know was shaped by forces beyond our understanding, forces that can be accessed with the right knowledge. The Eternal is the key to this. According to what is described here, the Codex is only the first part of a puzzle. And those who seek him know they are on the verge of finding something unimaginable." The silence settled again in the room. Elijah felt the weight of his words. "I was dealing with something much bigger than expected. And the danger seemed to increase every minute. We need to solve the coder's puzzle before they do it," Gustavo said, breaking the silence. "Amadou, can you help us with that?" The old teacher pondered for a moment before answering. "I can try. But understanding these clues and deciphering the full meaning will take time. And if you are being hunted, we don't have much time." Elias took a step forward, resolute. No matter how long we have, we need to try. It's our only chance. Amadou nodded, catching a magnifying glass to better analyze the symbols recorded on the center page. As he worked, Gustavo and Elijah sat nearby, exchanging glances of concern. Time seemed to run against them. They knew that their enemies were not far away and that every second told. After what seemed eternity, Amadou lifted his head, a mixture of triumph and fear in his eyes. I think I found it. Elias and Gustavo approached, eager to understand what he had discovered. Amadou pointed to a series of symbols that formed a kind of circular pattern, something Elias had not noticed before. This is a map. Not a common map, but an astronomical map. It indicates us a specific location in the sky, where, according to Codex, the power of the eternal can be accessed. And if the stars are aligned the right way. Before he could finish, a tall crash made the cabin shake. Elias looked at the door and saw the family shadows approaching. They met us, Gustavo whispered. Amadou quickly closed the Codex and looked at Elias with a fierce determination. You need to get out of here. Now. Elias and Gustavo were had no time. With the Codex again safe in the backpack, they ran to the back door, while the sound of steps and voices was getting closer and closer. As they leave the rear door, they saw the dawn starting to illuminate the horizon. But along with the new day, new challenges came. They were being persecuted for something much bigger than themselves. And now, with the partially resolved Codex, they knew that they were running against time and against enemies that would do anything to take what they carried. Elias looked at Gustavo, the weight of responsibility falling on his shoulders. We can't fail. Gustavo nodded, the severity of the situation reflected in his eyes. We won't fail. They knew the journey was far from over. The Codex riddle had just been the beginning. Now, with the fate of the eternal in front of him, Elijah and Gustavo would embark on a race against time, and against those who would do everything to prevent the truth from being revealed. The end. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, like and comment on the story.